Welcome, everybody, to our third and final summer series session. This is a rehabilitation and physical medicine working group webinar. And today's session, our final session for the summer, before next month, where hopefully some of us will meet at the Congress, is about emotional aspects of working in pediatric oncology rehabilitation and how we look after ourselves. We have two speakers joining us. I'm going to let those two speakers introduce themselves. And they're going to give their experience about working in this clinical area, as well as tell us how they look after themselves. My name is Abu Sidani. I'm the co-lead of the Rehabilitation and Physical Medicine Working Group at SIOP. I'll be chairing this session. So I'd like to first introduce everybody to Francesca Rossi. We know her as Francie. So Francie, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Hi, Abu. Thank you. I'm fine. Thank you. And you?
Yes, good. Thank you very much. Busy, but good. Thank you. And Francie, where are you joining us from?
Well, I'm joining from Turin in the north of Italy, near Milan. And in this moment, I am in the university I work at.
Wonderful. And Turin is a very lovely place and somewhere where a lot of us were very lucky to visit last year as part of a PSYOP project. What's the weather like there at the moment?
Today it's lovely. It's quite like in summertime, so it's very nice.
Good to hear. So you mentioned that you're at university. Could you tell us where you work and how long you've worked in pediatric oncology for?
Yes, I work at the Regina Margherita Children's Hospital in Turin and in the university as well. And I work in the field of pediatric oncology rehabilitation since 2003. So it's around 22 years.
Okay, so that's a long time by anybody's standards.
Yes.
Great, thank you. So today's session is about the emotional aspects of pediatric oncology rehabilitation and how we look after ourselves. So let's start with the basics. So you've mentioned there that you've worked for a long time in this clinical area. Do you consider it to be emotionally challenging?
Yes, I think that this is a very emotionally challenging area at first because we build very close relationships with the patients and families, and this can be very rewarding for us. But from the other point of view, when the things doesn't go so well from the ecological point of view, this closeness can be something that can hurt us. And so the challenge is to have not fear to build strong relationships, even if we are aware that in some situations this can become something that can hurt us.
Thank you. And do you remember when you first realized that the clinical area had emotional challenges? Sometimes people don't notice that straight away. So was it a particular event or case? Can you remember?
Well, I cannot remember exactly the first time, as you said, but I can share with you the story of the rehabilitation treatment of a very nice boy. It happened some years ago. He lost the possibility to walk due to a spinal cancer, a very aggressive cancer. And during the rehabilitation treatment, we used to establish each week one goal together, And then at the end of the week, we went to check if the goal was achieved. And I can realize that during our treatment, he went 1 week up and then 1 week down. This was related to the anti-cancer treatments, and therefore during an up week, at the end he was able to walk and to perform 4 steps, and it was a very emotional moment for everybody, for me, for him, for her mother, and in my heart I said, okay, these will be the first steps of a long number of steps. However, during the next days and next weeks, his oncological situation worsened, and so we had to change our goal according to a palliative setting. And these 4 steps remained the only 4 steps that he made during our treatment. And the worst thing was that in the last days of his life, I was not able to take care of him because I was at home with COVID-19. And therefore, it gave me a sensation of not having closed the circle with him. And I think that these stories can underline some important points of our job. At first, the difficulty to maintain our results when the oncological situation goes bad. The ability to change our goals, and then the sadness that can rise from the difficulty to close the circle sometimes. I think that these stories can underline this peculiar point of our job.
And thank you very much for sharing. It's a really powerful story and something that's obviously stuck with you for a long time. What we know is that in some areas, and maybe there are cultural elements to this as well, some people talk quite openly about the emotional challenges, and in some areas people don't. So what's it like where you are? Do colleagues talk openly together about these kind of challenges?
I think I am lucky because at first it is not easy to talk openly about these aspects, of course, but I am in a team where I can talk openly with my colleagues, and I think that this is a very important thing, and also something that is really precious to me to go on with this job. I used to say, okay, life is too sad. We have to eat something good. Okay, let's go to another room, or sometimes, okay, let's go talking in the secrecy of our room. And this is the moment where we sit down and talk. So I have the possibility to share my feelings with them, also because I think that we can share this kind of emotion, especially with colleagues. At first, because I think that they can understand us more deeply than other person, and then the other reason is that there are many privacy reasons for not talking about what happens at work with other people and about our feelings. I believe that some deep feelings are a private matter, and so it's not easy for me to share it with the others. But perhaps as a whole, as a healthcare professionals working in this field, all we have already felt sadness or helplessness. And therefore, I think that it's easy for us to understand each other. And I can still remember one time, a lot of years ago, I think around 15 years ago, when in a very bad afternoon, one oncologist take to me a cup of tea, or of tea, and still nowadays I am grateful to her to have understood my feelings in that situation. And lastly, we use also to share not only bad feelings and sadness, but also good feelings when something good happens. If a patient achieves some goals, we use to talk also about these things.
Thank you, Francie. And what really stuck out there So you mentioned that example of a colleague bringing you a cup of tea, and it's such a small thing in many ways, but in other ways, such a big thing that small thing was so important to you, and you've remembered it after all this time. Thank you for sharing. Now, one of the things we also know is that there is emerging evidence about the emotional aspects, but we see a lot of that in nursing and for medics, but for therapists and rehabilitation professionals, there's very little out there regarding the emotional aspects on our roles. Do you have any thoughts on how our roles differ to those of other professionals, and therefore how our experience may be when it comes to the emotional aspects of the role would differ possibly from other professions?
Yes, I think that our role at first has a different timetable in the terms that we stay with the child and with the family around 45 minutes, sometimes for a long time in the hospital context each day, for example, and we stay with them also during different phases of treatments. I think in general we have a positive role because rehabilitation at first is aimed at a goal and is the essence of the positive thing, a goal to achieve together. And then we are working on the possibility to achieve a new function, to reacquire function that have been lost. And I think this is positive in its essence. And after that, we use to perform rehabilitation treatment using toys for children, trying to adapt our exercises in a way that is as much as possible near to sport activities for adolescents. Therefore, I think that we can also share quite funny time with our patients, and this is a very nice thing. But we also touch an aspect that is an additional aspect of burden for families because the cancer itself is the first burden, and then there is also perhaps the disability or the motor difficulty that got with him. And some weeks ago, a father told me, okay, I was prepared to have a son with a illness, but I was not prepared to have a son with a disability because it requires you to change perhaps your location, your flat, and it takes a lot of things that can become very challenging for families and for children and adolescents.
Thank you, Francie. So this aspect of the emotional part of the role seems very much an expected part. So training, is that ever something that you've had regarding this area? Is it something that you've been provided with, or is it something that you've chosen to go on?
Well, I have been lucky because during my degree course at the university, I received a lot of training about emotional aspects because I am a neuro and psychomotricity therapist of the developmental age, and this kind of professional figure is nested in child neuropsychiatry. Therefore, we had a lot of inputs about these aspects. However, when I started to work, I also started supervision pathway with a psychologist. And our hospital organizes some kind of courses like mindfulness courses. I have not yet participated in these kind of courses, but I would like to do so in the future. So not so many, not so many abilities, but some things, some kind of possibility to learn more about these aspects.
That's great to hear. Thank you. So Francie, how do you look after yourself?
Well, at work, a job with my colleagues, trying at first to build positive relationships with them because I think that this is fundamental. And then also being part of pediatric oncology rehabilitation networks as our network, because I think it's really important to share things with other colleagues that share with you the same kind of experience. And then I find that it's really useful also clinical research, which I love, or, which I love, because it gives you the sensation to improve your effectiveness and your abilities to help the others. And so it is something that I think that is useful to have the sensation to better control the situation. And then personally, I think that the keyword is awareness. Awareness of what was really matters for you. Don't don't forget to think each day. Okay, what is really important to me? To take time for important things like families, friends. I have a lot of hobbies. I love sewing, running, and after that, I am. Sure that to help each other at first, we should help ourselves to stay well because we cannot be useful to others if we don't take care of ourselves.
Thank you very much. So when we had our event last year in Turin, one of your roles, your main role, was to bring fun to the event, which you did the most amazing job of. It was a very, very fun few
Thank
days.
you.
So you definitely have a lot of positive energy, Francie. So what one tip would you give to our colleagues for looking after yourself while working in this area?
Okay, just one tip. Try to see life from above in the order to understand what is really important to you.
Thank you very much. And we've talked about the emotional aspects, and some people may view that as a negative part of the role, but we've got to remember that pediatric oncology is um, an amazing area to work in. So focusing back on the positives, could you tell everyone what is the best thing about working in this clinical area for you?
Yes, I think at first the opportunity to build relationships, strong relationships, that is something quite unique for a job. Not all jobs allow you to have it. And then to meet incredible people because we know persons in a very particular moment of their lives where only really important things matters. And so we can really have a lot to think about. And also the opportunity to see life from another point of view. I think that our job allow us to consider another point of view of life, and I think this is really, really important. So totally, I agree with you. Is it a very nice job?
Francis, thank you so much. It's been really amazing to hear about your experience and the tips that you have for us about working in this clinical area. So thank you. Um, Before I let you go, just one final thing. You are attending the SciOp Congress in Amsterdam next month. What are you most looking forward to?
Well, firstly, to meet all the colleagues that have become friends during time. And so, first this aspect, and then also to learn a lot of things, listening of the different conferences and talks. So, I'm really happy to have the possibility to participate.
Francie, thank you so much. Thank you again. And I hope you'll join
Thank
us
you, Abby.
for the questions, any questions and answers afterwards. Thank you again, Francie. So that was Francie, the first of our two participants today. So I'd like to introduce the next participant to everybody, Zoe, and I'll get Zoe to introduce herself properly in just a moment. So Zoe, thank you so much for joining us. We're very grateful for you joining. Um, how are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, thanks. Sorry, everyone, I was a smidgy bit late. The traffic here in Brisbane is horrendous this evening, as I'm sure most of you can all relate to. So, my commute home took a fair bit longer than usual this evening, but my blood pressure has lowered now, listening to lovely Francie speak.
And for anybody who hasn't guessed, Zoe is joining us from Australia. And in these summer series sessions, we've been doing a few geography lessons actually. So for everybody and anybody whose geography of Australia isn't great, Zoe, could you describe where in Australia you live and just sort of describe where about that is?
Sure. So Brisbane is on the east coast. So most people have heard of Sydney at least. So Sydney is in the state below Queensland where I live. So we're talking about the top. If you're looking at the map on the right-hand side, it's got the pointy triangle and the Great Barrier Reef on the outside. That's the state of Queensland. And right in the bottom corner is the capital of Queensland, Brisbane. So that's where I'm joining you from today.
Amazing, thank you. And there's a considerable time difference between us, so that's the other thing that everybody will probably notice. It's morning for a lot of us. There's a few people who may have just got out of bed, but for you, you're back home from work, so that demonstrates the time difference.
Yeah,
Um,
evening time here.
yeah. So just tell us a little bit. You mentioned a bit, but where are you working at the moment, and how long have you worked in pediatric oncology?
So currently, I'm working at Queensland Children's Hospital, and I've sort of been in pediatric oncology in and out sort of over the last 6 years, so since 2019.
And we are discussing the emotional aspects of working in pediatric oncology rehabilitation. Do you consider it to be a clinical area in your experience that has emotional challenges?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, no, definitely.
And a similar question. Not everybody realizes that straight away when they come into the clinical area. Do you remember when you first realized? Again, was it a particular event or case?
Yeah, so I mean, I am a physio by trade, and I feel as though, um, oh yeah, I forgot to introduce myself with my role at the very beginning there. Sorry, everybody. Um, and I feel as though I've always been an acute therapist who's always worked in acute hospitals. So we sort of learn the pace that is required to be an acute therapist. Then I've chosen professionally to go into, yeah, the rehabilitation and oncology specialty. So I feel as though initially, when starting out, I was just taking it all on the chin, needing to see my getting through my caseload. But I can absolutely, definitely remember the case specifically that really flipped that coin for me. And um, I mean, it's definitely an area that I want to stay in for the majority of my career. But I can remember, yeah, a 2-year-old little boy with a brain tumor who had probably been diagnosed when he was about 18 months old. And he was unfortunately losing his battle with his medulloblastima. So he never made it out of hospital. And as things were deteriorating, and I can remember so distinctly his mum just being so thankful for our sessions. And her words, which have stuck with me my whole time ever since, were that thank you for the times for showing us that he was still a little boy. So for her going to a gym, oh, have I frozen? Oh no. Okay, sorry. Going to the gym, learning how to crawl over soft play, getting back into doing normal developmental things, for her were the highlights of their horrendous couple of months stay in hospital. And one of her final wishes, as he was ending the year of his life, was that she realized she was never going to have swimming lessons with him. So we pivoted, and one of our physio sessions became a hydrotherapy session in the pool, which was a little bit less therapeutic. And more about the beautiful experience that he was sharing with his parents. But yeah, I could say that would be the pivotal moment where I realized that this caseload was really different.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. And it sounds like a wonderful memory for that family, something that they probably won't ever forget. But so interestingly, that is a memory that you haven't forgotten either, and stays with you. So thank you so much for sharing. So a question about training. Is training, you talked about, that pace, and that's something very, very familiar, that some of us are conditioned about a pace. And then when we go into a certain clinical area, it's very different. Did you ever have any training? Has it ever been offered to you? Or is it something that you've gone out and sought yourself?
So interestingly, like I said, when I was dipping in and out of oncology, I sort of dipped between complex neurodisability, neuro-oncology, and sometimes that comes under the label of palliative care as a separate kind of hat. And interestingly, the only time I've ever had any formal training was when I was part of specific palliative care multidisciplinary teams. But I must say, I've kind of noticed a shift, I would say, in a post-COVID world where, I mean, I've been in the healthcare system in Australia across 2 states since COVID, but it does seem as though the word well-being or staff well-beings are sort of bandied around a little bit more. Not saying that I've necessarily seen tangible evidence of it changing our sort of training or our preparation, but yeah, so out of like potentially a 12-month long training calendar, there might be a single session on thinking about staff well-being, or how can we reflectively practice better so that we're able to dump and not dwell quite so much. But interestingly, it was through pediatric palliative care that I've had the most formal training in the emotional aspects. And I suppose what I find more challenging in pediatric oncology than when you get to wear the hat of pediatric palliative care is when we're rehabilitation specialists in the pediatric oncology space, the biggest uncertainty is prognosis. And even coming with my neurodisability background, there's so much emerging evidence now that, we can diagnose cerebral palsy earlier. We can give families certainty so much earlier. And especially as a physical therapist or a physiotherapist, and if you are somebody who chooses to sort of follow modern research, so you're really trying to move towards a participation focus, a very patient-centered, family-focused, very community activity kind of focus. How can we get this young person out and about in their community or meaningful environments with the people that matter? You're still trying to balance how much of their body structures and systems, to talk very physio language, do we need to set them up for the best success of the future, and be a little tiny bit hard-lined, because we kind of can see that if we can set their body up to survive them longer term, but at sometimes that comes at a smidgy bit of cost of the fun, or a cost of having to be the hard person who has the odd physio rule in their gym. And, a whole lot of the time, the parents are constantly wanting to know if we're putting in all of this effort, if we're coming back for specific appointments outside of just the treatment, or if we can't go home to our regional location earlier just because you want to keep them here for rehab. Like, are you guaranteeing me that they will not be stuck in a wheelchair? So I've actually find that lack of certainty and lack of prognostication unique again to our oncology rehabilitation setting. And probably one of the most challenging aspects, because then if you try to reach into the literature, you have absolutely nothing to guide you or to tell you how to sit with that uncertainty, because inherently, when these families access us, they're not just accessing us for our professional knowledge, but we're equally trying to coach and empower them to sit with the uncertainty that they are sitting with. So I've had some formal training in some settings that aren't necessarily applicable to this setting.
Very interesting, thank you. And I'm sure a lot of people will share your experiences, that training, if it is offered, it maybe isn't the most frequent thing. And certainly that idea that it's kind of within that palliative care remit, when actually working in pediatric oncology, we are likely to come across those facets of the emotional side. without necessarily being in the palliative area, but also those skills and that training can help us even if our families and patients aren't yet officially at a palliative stage. So very interesting, and yes, I think something that other people will certainly share experiences of. So Zoe, not a lot of people will know this, but we actually worked together once, didn't we? So when you were in London, we worked at two different hospitals, but they were very, very close together. I mean, walking distance, weren't they? So we shared a group of patients because our hospital shared the care, and that group of patients were DIPGs, or now more commonly known as DMGs, diffuse midline gliomas. Now, I certainly thought there were emotional aspects to working with that group of children, and that was particularly around the fact that the diagnosis is incurable. How did you find working with that group? Because you were very involved with that clinical area.
Yeah, and Abu, I have continued to be as well. So, the DIPG or the DMG group obviously hold a very special place in my heart, and it's devastating for absolutely everyone when you get the next DMG on the caseload. But I read something very, very helpful. I can't remember what year, but it was probably about 5 years ago now. And it was really understanding the concept of shifting from doing things. And this was about empowering and coaching parents, but that when kind of goalposts shift, it's a real switch from doing things to being with. And I think once I read that, I was able to really understand where I was going to be coming from. And it was to try and understand that being with what mattered to that young person. Who did they want to be with? In what context did they want to be doing it? And then if there were any barriers to them, in some ways, I mean, it's an absolutely devastating diagnosis. But right now, while we don't have the treatment advances, I mean, it's a tiny bit of a known cause. So I think the hardest part is the children who are starting to undergo some of the more experimental genetic kind of targeted treatments, and where that prognosis is no longer known. And again, it's sort of, even with some of those advances, they haven't changed prognoses, they've just changed the inevitable 18-month timeline. So I find the hardest part is more helping the parents sort of really in that transition, where I'm thinking I'm the professional in this situation. I can foresee the future, unfortunately, and I want to preempt and be ready for the physical deterioration, but it has to be a real shift from language choices about talking in terms of activities that are being done or what everything is sort of happening to a child, to just thinking about a shift in perspective. And yeah, and inherently they're going to have heaps of contact with health service sort of wherever they are, and so lots of reassurance that even whilst they are being with their young person, we are being with them at every step of the way.
So interesting. It sounds like to be able, and you have real considerable experience with that group working in several settings across the world now. It sounds like you've chosen to reframe that, and that has really helped you with
Yeah.
how you manage that very unique group of children.
Yeah, it definitely has. Because I think initially when I got into this area, I probably battled a lot internally with, oh my gosh, do I need to be doing so much for these children and these families? So probably actually the first time I read that, I can't tell you now if it was a properly peer-reviewed article or if it was something I found on a much less reputable source, but it might have been, it more most resonated with me, and that my role was just to be with them, holding their hand and helping, that every time we sort of got to a crossroads, I was letting them know that there were still two options, and sort of doing that dance alongside. But yeah, I think because I initially again sort of would carry lots of guilt of, oh gosh, have I prepared them enough? Have I preempted the next problem? But as long as I sort of had my ducks in a row, I could resource, as long as I'm doing the work in the background to have the resources ready, then I'm just meeting a family where they're at and still helping them put one foot in front of the other down a path that I know the direction of.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And I'm just going to touch on something that you mentioned earlier, but the other thing is that again, it seems like a lifetime away, but we worked through COVID, the pandemic, and you mentioned about that changing attitude. So I just wanted to touch on that again. Is that something that you feel? I mean, I think that in general life, people are probably more aware of the need to look after themselves. But you mentioned earlier, you do feel that within healthcare, there's better recognition now of the need to be resilient.
Well, I certainly don't feel as though I heard it ever mentioned in the first decade and a half of my career, but I like at the moment in our hospital and health service, so the equivalent of an NHS trust, the theme is it's the year of the people. So, they revamped the big staff room. At the moment, if we all complete a Working for Queensland survey, there's a $1,000 prize up so that a department could only spend it on a well-being venture. So this is what I mean, where I'm like, we're not there yet in terms of actual tangible things that are helpful, but it's a focus. And I think it's a focus that I didn't hear anything about in my first, like I said, more than a decade of work.
Interesting. Thank you. And I think, a lot of people will again agree with that experience that something has changed, and certainly the pandemic um, is responsible for that in many ways. Thank you. So Zoe, how do you look after yourself?
Well, I've done the mixture of unhelpful things like not talking about the emotional aspects or, um, yeah, not delineating my emotional eating from my emotions. But again, when I feel like there were times in COVID where in our line of work, there was not a single good story in the week. Or, when I was working across a couple of workplaces where the caseload just inherently meant I had not had a good news story all week. I again was sort of doing some reading outside of my usual physioscope and stumbled across some psychology recommendations that were if you could actually see the ocean and stare at the waves and listen to the waves, there were physiological rhythm resetting or biological rhythm resetting that would occur. And when I stumbled upon this, I was fortunate enough that both workplaces I worked near were within walking distance of the ocean. So after particularly horrendous days where I needed to walk down to the beach and actually just pound the pavement up and down in front of it until I had managed to reset, my own blood pressure and heart rate, and then could switch off from the day, not necessarily take it all home. And then it was probably actually a good idea for me to go join the land of the living. But equally, I'm not a great person who's able to switch off in mindfulness, or even when I'm exercising, which I need to do, as you just heard. That's quite a physical way to let go. My mind still ticks over, but I was fortunate enough as a youngster to learn music. And so as an adult, I have, and I actually joined this whilst in London. I joined my first choir since high school. And randomly, a weekly sing of 2 hours is 2 hours of mindfulness, because I can't read the music and work out what to do if anything else is going on in my head. So that is now my adult form of mindfulness.
Zoe, that's amazing. Thank you. Those are a few really, really interesting examples of how you look after yourself. Now, I'm just going to ask you to identify the one top tip that you would give colleagues for working in this clinical area, but not waves, because we have to assume that not everybody might be near the sea. So apart from waves, what top tip would you give?
Well, I thought about this. And I think inherently, if you get into the work of oncological rehabilitation in children, you've probably got an enormous heart and a bit of a caring personality deep down. So I think the most important thing is to be able to surround yourself with your important people. And that doesn't necessarily need to be physically or geographically. I, for one, have moved away from heaps of my important people regularly, but then it's, yeah, being able to kind of find a way that as you're walking out of the building, feeling horrendous, that's my cue to be like, you know what, I haven't texted that friend in 6 months. That's what I'm doing for me today. Or, yeah, or, again, and I sort of went through a phase of life where all of my close people were moving into the next phase of theirs with young children and families, not available at the same time as my 5 p.m. phone calls would need to be. And my modern version of journaling is actually writing it out in my notes section of my phone. So the letter to myself or the long ranty kind of text that I might have needed to send someone, I'm still getting it down, I'm still getting it out. Whether it ends up actually leaving my phone doesn't always happen, but that's something I always have on me, and another option that's helping me dump, not dwell.
Zoe, thank you so much. It's been fascinating hearing your experience, and thank you for sharing your tips for working in this clinical area. One final thing before you go. So you were at a big congress this year in Australia, and lots of people outside of Australia and New Zealand probably don't know too much about this. So who organizes it? Is it a yearly event, and where is the next one?
Yeah, so I went to the ANZCHOG conference. So that's our Australian and New Zealand Childhood Hematology and Oncology Groups annual conference. So, I mean, I don't necessarily know the history of it, but I believe it started as a sort of medical only group, but it's absolutely expanded to include nursing and allied health or therapies as well. And definitely this year there was very good representation sort of across disciplines, and it has been that way now for a little while. Like I know Catherine Online, I think, went over to Perth last year, for instance. So it was the Australian and New Zealand professional group. So for the trainees, medical professionals who are coming into this specialty, then the specialists, and then, like we said, the nursing and therapy staff that have specialized in it. And enormous amounts of research are collated and collaborated through it, because all of these patient groups are so rare. You know, you need to have national organization to get enough people onto studies. So that's one of its purposes. Teaching and information sharing is another. And then the social networking aspect is the other. So I would actually have to do a very fast Google to triple check which city it's in next. 2026. Apologies for not having this ready. Newcastle, so New South Wales, so down just north of Sydney.
So, well, whether you're in New Zealand or Australia or anywhere else, Newcastle, put that in your diary for next year.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you again. So we've reached the end. A huge thank you to Francesca Rossi, and a huge thank you to Zoe Cotton for joining us and sharing their experiences with us. We do have some time left, so if there are any questions from our audience today, please feel free to ask. You can unmute, you can put your cameras on, you can write something in the chat, whatever you're comfortable with. And indeed, Francesca and Zoe, if you have any questions for each other, you are very welcome to ask too.
Abu, I can just see a question in the chat. Should I answer that one?
Let's see. I should say that there have been a few people who have left, but they've said thank you very much, and that they have really found the session interesting. So I'll read it out. It's to you, Zoe. It says, thank you for generously sharing your experience. This is a question from Ludmila. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. I would like to thank I would like to kindly ask you if you could share a typical working day, how it looks like. Do you usually find a moment just for yourself during the day, or are you constantly surrounded by colleagues and children? So it's a question for you, Zoe.
Thanks very much for the question. I mean, at the moment, it's a slightly challenging question to answer. Just I don't know what a typical day looks like, but I mean, I'm being slightly facetious there. I would say it's quite hustly bustly, but I mean, I make a real point of I have to take lunch and I need to generally get outside into the fresh air for that. I'm somebody who resets, in nature. So I just need to be able to see something green and feel sun on my face, and then I can go back in and do it all again. So even if I'm only getting my lunch at like 2 p.m. in the afternoon, I have to stop. There's bad days where I might do some lunch at a desk whilst typing notes because I want to get out on time, but I will then need to have had a coffee or something where I've just had, and I mean, even if I have a really negative experience or something that super upset me, my strategy, my boss now knows that I'm like, I just have to go downstairs for 5 minutes. And we're blessed where we are, where there is a patch of grass, and as silly as it sounds, as long as I cross the zebra crossing and just do a lap around the grass, I can reset and go back up and see the next person. But yeah, it is normally a day constantly surrounded by colleagues and children.
Zoe, thank you. Yeah, lunch at a desk. I'm sure many of us have done that far too many times. I certainly have. Francie, I might ask you the same question if you don't mind. So what does a typical day look like for you? And do you get time in the day if you needed it, or are you constantly surrounded by colleagues and children?
Oh, well, I try to plan my work day, finding some spaces to take a little bit of time for me. As well as Zoe, I always have lunch and always have lunch with colleagues and trying to talk about other things outside of work, so about our life outside of work. Unfortunately, I cannot go out of the hospital because I need to stay inside. I cannot feel in the air, but I could understand what you said because it's something that I absolutely share. And as a Zoe, when something bad happens, I need to go down to return to my department, rehabilitation department, to close in a room, to breathe, and then to change my mood to meet the next person, because sometimes you pass from a situation, a very sad situation, to a new patient, for example, and you need to recharge between one situation and the other. So I use the same strategy, and so I was impressive about your story because it's very near to me, even if I am so so long away from you in the world. So nice to hear this experience.
Thank you. Thank you very much, both of you, for sharing that. Any other questions from our audience today? Again, feel free if you'd like to ask those out aloud, or if not, in the chat. And you've both got a thank you from Lyudmila for that answer. Okay, I can't see any more questions. If anybody does, as I said, put your hand up or just unmute and ask. And if not, I'd like to round things up and say a final thank you. Catherine, I've just seen Catherine pop up. Catherine, did you have any questions? Catherine just popped up on the screen. So hi, hello, Catherine.
Just say hello.
Just, Thank you. Yeah, final thank you to Zoe and Francie for joining us, for being so open with your experience and sharing your tips for working within this clinical area. Thank you to our attendees today as well. And a final reminder that this session has been recorded and it will be made available on the PsyOp YouTube channel in a few days. So thank you again, everybody, and we will catch up with everybody soon.